Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 11, Episode 120. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Glad you guys are back with us for this Friday show. Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I bet you're doing pretty good. Your Suns are up 2-0. I saw that shot of you on social media taking your shirt off at the game and all like that. You were pretty excited there.
It's been a while since the Sun had this kind of run.
Most definitely. I assume you'll be tuned in to Game 3 later tonight, huh?
Yes, I will be. I'll be dog sitting as well. So me and the pup will be rooting on the Phoenix Suns to go up 3-0. Yeah, Devin Booker, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, man, they're all playing lights out.
All right, good deal.
All right, Dave, a lot to talk about today. A little bit later in the show, we will have, as we did last Friday, a Steelers Depot roundtable with contributors. Today it'll be Owen Straley and Josh Carney talking about Pat Freiermuth, talking about defensive backs, talking about Buddy Johnson, some of the guys we didn't touch on quite as much 2 weeks ago with Jonathan and Tom. So really looking forward to you guys hearing that discussion. I think it was a really fun one between the four of us. That'll be a little bit later in the show. But for now, the Steelers wrapping up OTAs. Of course, they've had players speak after practice as they have had all offseason, and most recently it was Robert Spillane and Chukwuma Okorafor. But I want to start with comments made by JuJu Smith-Schuster the other day, because I think he had some of the more interesting commentary. It almost felt like he was wishing more than expecting, but JuJu basically saying that he believes and wants to play more on the outside this year after being really kind of stuck in the slot last season. And in terms of potential replacements for JuJu in the slot, JuJu at least is pointing to one Ray-Ray McCloud, Dave.
Yeah, I don't know about you when listening to that entire media session there. Man, there are points of it. You know that meme, that animated GIF of Michael Scott from The Office, where he has that kind of that grimace looking face there. I believe I did that a few times during that interview. Look, I love JuJu. I think he's a great kid. I think he's a team player. I mean, there's not much to not like about him. I understand some people, don't like him being so active, maybe on social media, and then, all that transpired with the TikTok, logo dances last year. All that's kind of, we've seen worse, right? I mean, we've seen a lot worse than stuff like that. Sometimes, though, I think I think what he means to say and maybe what he actually says sometimes maybe doesn't mesh, but when contexting out and listening back through everything that he had to say, it wasn't the best optics overall. I don't think, mixing in his talk about potential free agency next year and increasing his value. Look, this isn't the first time this offseason that we've heard JuJu talk about wanting to play on the outside more, and right. There's nothing inherently wrong. I don't think with that. I just think when you start taking that whole 18, 20 minutes, whatever it was, and mixing it together, talk about playing on the outside and stats and increasing his free agent value. It wasn't a good look. I mean, did you?
Yeah, but can you blame him for it? I mean,
I wrote right. That look. I mean, 83% of his targets last year was in the slot. I mean, that's. I mean, look. I mean, what is his best position in the Steelers' offense? It's in the slot, right?
Sure, and the best thing for the Steelers is to keep him there as much as possible.
All right, now is 83% target rate in the slot way too high? Yeah. I mean, I feel him in that aspect of it. It would be nice to get him back more along the lines of. I mean, I don't know if we're going to get back down to pre-last season numbers of, I don't know, what was the range? Like something like 51 to 54 or 8%, somewhere around in there. Sure, they do need to move these wide receivers around more, and I think that's kind of one of the maybe one of the bigger takeaways from OTAs this year is that people will be more, or the wide receivers will be a little bit more interchangeable. I'm all for that. The more that you can do out of maybe a same personnel grouping with people lined up in different spots makes it a lot harder for a defense to defend. But just and once again, I have nothing wrong with him saying, man, I'd like to play on the outside more. But when you start marrying all what he said along with the other aspects of what he said, it just the optics once again weren't great. It makes it look like, man, I'd like to get back out on the outside again so I can get my average yards per catch up to 13.3 yards, and that way I don't have to settle for a 1 year, another 1 year way under market value deal again. Because look, you had to feel for the guy this offseason, right? I mean, if there's any one Steeler that had bad luck during free agency, it was JuJu Smith-Schuster. Now, had he posted 90-something catches last year and had a 13-point or even a 12.8, 13.1 average yards per catch ratio, what would that have got him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a whole lot more. Yeah, JuJu's basically just saying, I want to play on the outside, so my yards per catch go up. I get more explosive plays. I run a deeper route tree, and so I'm not averaging 8.5 yards per catch the way I did last year. My market value sucked because of it. So I don't blame him for that honesty, and I think we all recognize kind of the situation that he was in. He doesn't want to repeat that this year. And I think, I've said that even if he stays in the slot, they have to work on expanding his route tree. You don't have to run just 3-yard option routes just because you play in the slot. You can still run, to me, basically the entire route tree. So even if you keep him there, you can still work on that. And I certainly want to see him have higher than an 8.5 yards per catch this year. So I don't blame what he's saying. I think it's more, though, him wanting and wishing than the reality of what's going to happen. Because if you push JuJu outside, Ray-Ray's not going to come into the slot that often, and, a little bit maybe, but you want to put your best guys out there. So sure, could Claypool kick to the slot some, maybe even Washington occasionally, maybe, but JuJu's best home in Pittsburgh's eyes is going to be playing in that slot position where he's that big combat catch guy, the key guy on third down, the trusted guy. It's going to make the tough catch over the middle of the field.
You're not old enough to remember the old Life cereal commercials and hey, let's get Mikey. Let Mikey try it.
I'm barely old enough for commercials in this day and age. Does anyone watch commercials anymore?
And I bring up kind of that old let Mikey try it. He'll eat anything. You need to Google that to understand where I'm coming from. YouTube that one after we get off the podcast here. But the other part that had me grimacing was well, JuJu, you're so good in the slot. What who basically who would they put in there? And then let Ray-Ray McCloud do it. Say anything but that. Look, and in a terrible take, I think about 3 weeks ago, I said, man, was Ray-Ray McCloud perhaps the biggest winner on the Steelers roster right after the draft? Because of, the team obviously didn't draft a wide receiver, first time since 2011, yada, yada. This is a kid that re-signed that, you kind of wondered, even if he did resign, maybe what his future for 2021 held. I mean, nobody, I think, more better secured maybe a spot on the 53-man roster because of what happened or really didn't happen in the draft than one Ray-Ray McCloud. And in that terrible take, I said, look, it's up to Matt Canada to do a better job, assuming Ray-Ray does make the 53-man roster, of finding ways to help Ray-Ray McCloud win more, all right? Because this is the same Ray-Ray McCloud that to date I think has 25 career NFL receptions. 15 of those, I believe, have come behind the line of scrimmage, okay? Of the other 10, I believe just one came more than 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, okay? So what within those set of stats gives you, and film so far gives you any confidence that, okay, well, we'll move JuJu outside and to help eat up some of those snaps. Let's put Ray-Ray McCloud in there. Now, I'm all for Ray-Ray McCloud having kind of that same kind of, what do you have, 164 or 5, I think, offensive snaps last year, touched the football, I don't know, 26, 28 times in total there. I'm all for still getting him on the field, 150 to 200 offensive snaps if you can in 2021. And I'm also all for some of those snaps coming within the slot on occasion, and maybe a guy like JuJu Smith-Schuster moving outside there. But I'm also all for moving Ray-Ray McCloud around even more, and getting the football to him enough where he has to be a respected part of the offense anytime he is on the field, instead of the old proverbial, like I used to talk about with Dre Archer or whatnot. He comes in the game and oh, look, there he is. You can tell because he has the red flashing light on his on his helmet there. It was another part of, in my opinion, kind of the bad optics to say, oh, let Ray do it. He'd been better served. Say, you know what? Chase Claypool played a little bit in the slot. In college at Notre Dame, occasionally a guy like Deontay Johnson can move inside. It was just part of that had me grimacing as well too. And I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. You don't see a huge, barring injury, you don't see a huge uptick in slot snaps for one Ray-Ray McCloud, right?
I don't. I mean, it could be a little bit, sure. And I think in Canada's offense, there may be different ways to get him involved and more consistently involved. The snaps, started decent last year, then he really tailed off in the back half of the year in terms of the jet stuff and the pre-snap motion and leverage in space and, the horizontal passing game. Those are things that fit McCloud's skill set. So I think he'll work well in Matt Canada's offense. But in terms of having a consistent role in the slot, I don't see that. I didn't mind JuJu's comments really at all, but I'll read the quote here that JuJu said on Ray-Ray, saying, quote, "I think the second person to play behind me is Ray-Ray McCloud. He's a guy that you guys really haven't seen him in a slot role. He's explosive in practice. He makes plays. Obviously, he's really good on special teams, but you'll probably see more of him playing slot this year. He's the guy who would fit the position second best." And he's right that the Steelers really don't have a defined slot receiver behind JuJu. I think Claypool is probably the next man up and kind of fits that role maybe the best behind JuJu from a talent, skill set standpoint. But in terms of actual bona fide slot receivers, it is probably Ray-Ray. But the question is, you're putting Ray-Ray on the field and JuJu's on the outside. You're taking off. I mean, Deontay, Claypool, Washington, you're not putting your best personnel out on the field.
Yeah, and people, I think a few people have said, well, why didn't you mention the possibility of James Washington possibly playing in the slot more? And then I think you even filled a question or two on the Twitter machine about, well, why not Deontay Johnson? So I'll let you answer why those two guys aren't predominantly the best. Probably choice. Now Deontay could do it, but I mean, explain why he's better at the X position instead of in the slot.
Well, it's really just where he's played the most of his time is at the X and Washington at the Z. But in terms of Johnson's skill set as the actual and someone with good releases, strong route running, ability to beat man coverage. Usually you're faced against the backside corner, locked on you one-on-one. So that's where Johnson really fits the best. Plus in the slot, if you're running some of those combative catches, middle of the field type stuff with his hands and undersized frame, that's going to be an issue. And for Washington, just probably not as explosive and shifty and precise as a route runner as you would like to have in the slot. I mean, he's fine, but he's going to be more the Z clear out type of guy. So as you said, these guys are going to be interchangeable. I think really even last year, it was kind of positionless. Guys were lining up all over the place, especially in some of the hurry up stuff, catch up stuff. Ben was kind of just putting guys in spots, and they were just kind of, in a way they went. So it wasn't nearly as static as years past where you had to define X, Z, and F, the slot receiver. It was much more open and versatile, and that'll probably continue this year. But obviously, the Steelers' best option, the best thing for them is to have JuJu playing inside.
Absolutely, and to circle back to one of I think the key comments that you made there at the top of this topic discussion here, you can still have him run deeper routes out of the slot or out of those bunches or what have you. Man, I love the slot fade, man, and that's something JuJu has run well, during his career. You can run switch route concepts, more of those if need be as well too. You can do things that help JuJu have a higher average depth of target than 5.3 yards. Right? I mean, and even with him playing with a slot, man, you go back and you look at some of, you go to next gen stats and pull up some of them games from last year and look at his route charts, man. Looks like he was a running back, In my mind, he could have conveyed. And the bad thing about it is you have, at the same time, he's fielding questions about his free agent market value there. So I think that's a little bit where, unfortunate for him, he got tripped up. Not necessarily tripped up. He's answering questions about his market value in addition to answering questions or talking about what his goal is to play outside. I think he would have been better served to say, look, I'm willing to help this team. However they bet, most need me. I would like to maybe potentially get the opportunity to make more plays down the field, and even maybe potentially playing outside more. I think it would have been a much better way for him to kind of phrase some of those answers, because I think in totality, and if you were to bring somebody in from the outside that a national writer or whatnot, and they watched the totality of that media session, I mean, it really comes off of, I want to play outside because I got to get that stats up because I got to get paid. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, but I can appreciate the honesty. I think he's just being honest. And
sure.
So many of these guys, they want to give you the cookie cutter answer. I did a terrible take on this a couple weeks ago that, and I don't mind someone who wants to be cookie cutter and not, say anything that might rock the boat. But a guy who just wants to be honest about it, I mean, hey, I'm all for it. I think fans yearn for someone who's going to be honest and not just tell you kind of the boilerplate standard answer. But to the point about JuJu, being able to have a higher yards per catch in the slot. I mean, he played in the slot more last year than probably any other year, but even in 2018, 2019, he was predominantly in the slot. I think you posted numbers that showed that, Dave. I mean, his slot percentage didn't dramatically increase last year, I don't believe.
Not as far, I don't believe, as overall snaps played out of there. Now, the percentage of targets what was a lot different.
Okay. What about percentage of snaps, though?
I'll have to double check on some of those numbers there, but he, I think 2018 was it? Yeah, I think 2018 he played a little bit more. I mean, he's obviously not played the amount of snaps in the slot that he played last season in the previous 3 seasons. And then the target ratio was, I think in total he had, I think last season around 100 snaps outside of the slot. And I think he was targeted on, what was it, something like 24 times on the outside, something like, I don't know, what was it, 17 catches for 100 yards or something along. I don't have the numbers in front of me here, but they can do a better job of obviously moving around. And the other thing is, he referenced back to, well, my best season was, when 2000, his second season, Pro Bowl season, when he had more production on the outside.
Right, sure. You play on the outside, you're going to run a deeper route tree. You're going to get more chance for explosive vertical plays, especially in this offense. So I understand the desire there, and I do think to some degree he will play a little more on the outside this year. Maybe not as much as he would want to, but it's just going to be dependent on other guys and how they play in the slot, because JuJu has become a really valuable weapon, especially on third down. He's one of the top third down receivers to me in football, and just in terms of just moving the sticks and making a tough catch and going over the middle and getting his head taken off by a linebacker, but still making the play. And so that's where he's going to bring the most value to this team, is playing inside.
He did, to at least kind of credit him here, so people won't send me a ton of hate mail when it comes to him. He did did have a nice quote there at some point, and I'm trying to pull it up here, that lets him know that he knows. He says, but as far as third down plays and all like that, I still don't mind playing inside and outside. We have in our formations, how we have it set up is that we move around, whether I'm X, like we're always moving around to different positions, so you can't really tell if I'm the number 3 receiver as a slot, but then again I'm playing outside, so it all varies. That's a fantastic quote. I mean, that should have been the gist of his whole why I want to move outside more.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, I think more than anything, and why this has become such a large talking point, at least for us this morning, is the fact that all the quotes combined, along with his talk about free agency and market value, if you'd have picked these, if they would have been separate press conferences, I don't think it would have been as bad of optics. I just think everything mixed together and how he kind of said it just didn't come off great.
Yeah, but we know even if he gets stuck in the slot this year, he's going to play that role really well. He's not going to complain about it. It's going to be fine, and he's going to do his job and do it well. And that's, to me, the most important thing.
And the onus is on Matt Canada to make sure that he utilizes JuJu more down the field, whether it be in the slot, whether it be outside. Look, to JuJu's credit, I mean, was there a wide receiver in the NFL last season with more hard-fought yards after the catch? I mean, what was his average yards per catch last season? 9 point something.
8.6.
8.6. It wouldn't even have been that good if he didn't have some of those. He just had a tremendous yards after the catch last season. On a lot of hard fought yards in there as well too. So if not, his average, his average yards per reception probably would have been even lower than that. So, I mean, this is a tough physical guy, catches the ball, he delivers, I think something like, 27, 28 third and fourth down receptions last year, and, converted 23, 24 of those as well. So, I mean, that's a guy that you want to get the football to on third and fourth down, probably in the slot, and I think he's well aware of that. So, moving forward in that, it'll be interesting to track this. How will his average depth of target be in 2021? How many routes will he run outside of the slot, and what will his target percentage be outside of the slot?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are numbers we'll be charting, or Tommy will be charting, and will be very interested in tracking throughout the season. But yeah, I think overall, Canada's offense is going to have definitely a horizontal aspect to it, but they should be able to get away from some of the run game substitute stuff, where last year, JuJu was kind of by extension the run game with the one-step game, the three-step game, some of the RPO stuff, just to try to move the sticks on 1st and 10. So that if you get away from that, your run game itself is actually stronger with Najee Harris and hopefully an improved run blocking offensive line. So that, I think, will give the receivers and the offense more freedom to run some deeper routes and won't have to be kind of reliant on becoming the short passing game, which will be which was the run game last season.
And I really think people are underselling what maybe Chase Claypool can possibly do with maybe a slightly expanded role in the slot as well too. I mean, this is another big buy. And here's the other downfall about putting a guy the size of Ray-Ray McCloud in the slot. He gonna go dig out a safety or linebacker for you right. when you want to run out of that? Probably not. But a guy like Chase Claypool can help maybe alleviate some of those, or some of that, maybe that physicality wear and tear plays on JuJu, especially when not targeted. Because there's one thing that definitely showed up in Chase Claypool's college tape at Notre Dame, and that he's willing to do that dirty work for you, and albeit he didn't play a ton in the slot, it's something that he has done, and you can still run a lot of the same. You can make defenses really think a little bit more by putting Chase Claypool in there, who's really technically even a bigger body guy than JuJu, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, you better really think twice of who you have doing what when you do move Chase Claypool inside. So I think you can get JuJu his wish of playing more outside, and I'm all here for it. I think that's something that they should do, and I think potentially Chase Claypool could be a guy. You still run the switch routes. You can still run those the slot fades. You can still run. Look, I mean, Chase Claypool was good at the underneath crossers at Notre Dame as well too. Now that's when most of his drops, I think, unfortunately happen. But that's a guy that's tough to defend out of the slot going across the middle of the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, put him on a smaller 185-pound nickel corner. You got a good matchup there. So, yeah, we'll see. I think the snaps on the outside will come up for JuJu, maybe not as much as he would like, but I do think there'll be some sort of increase there. So good discussion on JuJu. Anything else that he said, Dave, that you wanted to touch on? But that was kind of the central theme of the conversation.
Yeah, it was mostly about, I thought he had some great comments about Ben and Ben being locked in and asking questions, but all that will get, forgotten real quickly.
Yeah.
The only thing now at this point is, I mean, JuJu's bound to talk to the media again, between now and the start of training camp or even at the start of training camp there. This stuff is going to what he said the other day is going to be thrown back at him. You
think?
I think so. If I was the one asking a lot of questions, I would want him to, go deeper on the subject of both his market value and him wanting to play outside.
Right. Yeah, we'll see for sure. We'll talk about Devin Bush now. He spoke with the media, I think, on the same day. Did he speak yesterday? When did Devin Bush speak?
Same day as JuJu.
Same day as JuJu. Okay.
Right. Well, that would have been Wednesday, I believe.
Anyway, yeah. Days are running together.
Yeah.
Devin Bush saying that he's about 80-90% back from his torn ACL, says he expects to be 100% ready and healthy for training camp, just about a month from now, which is coming up pretty fast here. But Devin Bush also talking about, and it was a very pointed question that he was asked. He was flat out asked, can you cover Jarvis Landry? A reference to the Steelers' inability to cover Jarvis Landry in the wildcard game last year. And Bush, flat out said, yes, 100% that he can. And listen, I'm not going to blame any player for, answering that way. What's he supposed to say? No, I can't do it. Especially a guy of Bush's talents. But that sparked back up the linebackers on receivers debate, which has been going on for 5 years running.
Yeah, we're going to continue, I think, talking about that, unfortunately, and unfortunately probably into the season a few times as well, too. What do you expect him to say? No, I can't cover him in a slot,
Right.
Of course he's going to say he can cover him in the slot. Now, look, does he give you the better opportunity? If you're going to any linebacker you're going to throw out there on the Pittsburgh Steelers on the inside, does he present the best possible matchup? Yes, but that's that's only that's the best of the worst scenarios, right? Right there. I think the biggest thing is to do your best to make sure you don't get schemed into situations and personnel packages where you have to face that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about this for the next 2 hours. I don't really have a desire to do so today about why this is a bad idea for Pittsburgh. I think most fans understand why this is a bad idea. I would just say to the Steelers coaches, when has this worked? When has this idea of linebackers on receivers, of not traveling corners to the inside against some of these spread empty sets, when has that been a favorable thing for you? Because not only are you putting a linebacker on receiver, now we're corners on a running back. Now corners getting paid to cover, a guy who's not going to be the primary threat in the passing game. So just bad matchups all around. So I just would ask the Steelers, when has this been beneficial to you? Because it doesn't feel like it really ever has been.
Keith Butler, the third-ranked defensive coordinator on Pro Football Focus's ranking list. I had to look at that about 2 or 3 times to make sure my eyes weren't deceiving me. Look, yeah, I mean that's a whole nother topic all in and of itself there. But yeah, you just gotta stay out of those situations there, and I mean that's gonna because of the magnitude and the way those things went down, and really results based, right? I mean, because the results weren't great and stuck out like a sore thumb. That's why it's a topic right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, football is a results based game, so. Right. The results have been consistently poor for many years now. And yeah, I mean, Devin Bush is going to give you a better shot than Spillane or John Bostic or any other linebacker on this team. So if there's a guy that has a chance to do it, it could be him. And Landry's not an athletic marvel either. He's a pretty, average to below average athleticism guy. But it's not just Landry. It could be anytime those receivers get moved, whether it's a true slot receiver or number one, they get shifted to number three. The Steelers really have not matched up well against that. And if they continue to, keep doing what they've been doing, they're going to keep getting what they've been getting, which is, poor results.
What else stuck out to you about what Bush had to say?
I think that was really about it. He did say that he stayed in Pittsburgh all offseason to rehab, wanted to be around the team because they made the investment in him, and he wanted to kind of make sure that he was doing the right thing, staying on track. So really seemed to attack and get after his rehab and puts himself in a position to where I don't know exactly he's going to be 100%, no restrictions come day one of training camp, but I don't think he'll be starting on PUP, and I think he'll be able to start getting on the field right away from day one, presumably at Latrobe.
Is there a chance you at least open up camp with him on active PUP, just as him and Banner really too? I mean,
but what would they? Is there a hurdle they have to clear? I mean, what is the point of that? I mean,
the active PUP, obviously you can't. I think you have to stay more individual until you actually, once
you can't do anything on PUP, right?
I think you can only work on the side on active PUP.
Right, but you can't go through individual drills. Right. You can't do 7-on-7. I mean, I've seen these guys on PUP. They just stay on the sideline. So I'm not sure if he spends 2 days. I mean, after 2 days, you're going to clear him? I mean, what hurdle is he overcome in those 2-3 days that would change the status?
Yeah, so, I'm just talking about maybe a week or two, get him, run him around a little bit, just more of a double. I'm not saying it'll happen. It obviously is an option, and obviously, we only play doctors on Twitter, but. It's the thing with him. Well, really Banner too. I mean, Banner's injury happened so early in the season. I mean, so we're not talking about him and Bush. We're not talking about guys that went down like week 9, week 10.
Mm-hmm.
A guy like Bud Dupree, for instance, it'd be interesting to see what happens with him and the Titans. How close is he? Might he have to start on their active PUP list? Now, active PUP is they come off active PUP. Obviously, the difference between active and reserve PUP is once you go on reserve PUP, you have to miss the first 6 games, 6 games or whatnot. With active PUP, it just means the level of practice activity, but you can be pulled off. And the other thing is you cannot go on reserve PUP at the start of the season unless you were started on active PUP. So just a fail-safe. Do I think that's going to happen with both those? No, it's just it'll be interesting to get past that hurdle at the start of training camp.
I think what could happen, I think has a decent chance of happening, is maybe for the first couple days, the first padded practice, he won't be in team or they'll limit his reps. I think he'll work in individual and some 7-on-7. Well, I mean, I guess he'd be out there in 7-on-7, but, some non-context type stuff, some individual work, some maybe one-on-one type work, but maybe not in team. Maybe they'll ease him along in that sense. But I don't think you're going to put him on PUP or sit him out for any length of time.
The good thing is there's already been footage out there from OTAs of him doing the the things that you would hope to see him being able to do, most definitely by the start of training camp. He's already doing those things now, and really Banner for that matter too. So the fact of the matter is that probably him and Zach Banner are on the Heath Miller plan, and I think Banner was the one that kind of referenced that a few weeks ago. These guys know what they're doing. Sure. Barring any kind of unique setback, both those guys, Banner and Bush, should be ready to go by week 1. That's the biggest takeaway.
Mm-hmm. Another inside linebacker spoke yesterday. That was Robert Spillane, and Dave, you seem to enjoy that interview very, very much.
Boy, wanted me to go out and buy a Robert Spillane jersey. How could you not root for that guy? I mean, seriously. I mean, this is. I don't want to use the Rudy analogy here, but. I mean, the guy is quintessential Steelers, is he not? I mean, and quintessential backup inside Steelers linebacker at that. Very poised with the media. I thought he gave some great answers to. In fact, that might serve as the best OTA interview. I think just really up front and all, and really a team guy, and just all around, just great answers there. I thought some of the and you wrote it up, so I'll let you speak about it. Is him being forthcoming with some of the things he wants to or wanted to work on this offseason?
Yeah, he wants to continue. Well, actually, he said Mike Tomlin in their after season exit interview said he wants him to work on two things: his coverage and his hug blitzing ability. And hug blitzing is blitzing and rushing the quarterback when your assignment stays in. So if you're covering a running back and he stays in to pass protect, that gives you the freedom and the green light to go ahead and blitz and rush the quarterback. And so those are the areas he wants to improve on. I think the coverage was a pleasant surprise last year, both in tape and the charting we do. He graded out very well there, and he picked up 2 sacks last season. So I think it was overall a very strong, first season in that kind of starting role through unfortunate circumstances, of course, with Devin Bush's injury, but overall a good season for Robert Spillane.
I liked his comments about it's his job to help guys like Buddy Johnson. I mean, those are kind of things, as cliche as they might sound sometimes, those are the type of things you like to hear coming out of players' mouths and all like that. It was fun to hear him, talk about the Derrick Henry hit last season, and how that was just still kind of a special moment for him, coming obviously against his former team in the Tennessee Titans. Excited to get on the field again and play next to Devin Bush, because obviously that didn't happen too terribly much, but he did. It sounds like him and Devin Bush have a pretty good relationship together. To hear him talk, it sounds like those two are constantly in communication and on the same page together when it comes to both on the field and off the field stuff there as well too. Do you get any sense of kind of parsing his quotes yesterday that maybe he feels that he might be in the driver's seat to be the week 1 starter next to Devin Bush?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we talk about JuJu trying to speak stuff into existence. I think Spillane did that more than JuJu did. Here's what Spillane said. Quote, "I'm just so excited to be able to play next to him," referring to Devin Bush. "I didn't get very many snaps next to him at all last season." Said they're good teammates. They talk a lot. So, I mean, based on those comments, and obviously you want players to have confidence and believe that they're going to be the guy, it sure sounds like Spillane believes that he will be the starter next season. Now, he did go on to say that he doesn't know how the rotation is going to go in the depth chart, leave it up to the coaching staff. And so, obviously, he doesn't know how this thing's going to go. But the way that he spoke, at least in that answer, gave me the impression that he believes he's going to be the starter.
When hearing that, what was your first thought?
My first thought was that Spillane is acting like he's planning to be the starter next season.
What was your second thought?
Will he be the starter next season was my second thought. My idea is...
I'm digging here. What was your third thought?
Well, here's what I'm thinking, and we'll see who makes the team and all that. But let's assume that Vince Spillane's going to make the team, obviously. Let's assume Vince Williams does as well. I think you probably rotate all 3 of those guys. I think you could play Bush and Vince Williams in base defense, and then I think you play Bush and Spillane in nickel, and Bush just alone in dime packages. So that's a way to maximize your depth, maximize skill sets. Vince Williams strong against the run, Spillane better in coverage, in a way to get all those guys on the field. So that's the way I would do it personally, but obviously we got a long ways to go to figure that stuff out.
Just going to be, my head immediately went to Vince Williams, man. Boy, Vince sure has been lying low, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, I mean,
I know
he hasn't had to do much.
Right. Be interesting to hear from him, or having heard from him. It would have been during these OTAs. I just kind of wonder what this might mean for him if Robert Spillane stays healthy throughout the and winds up being maybe that guy. Now, are you still going to run the snot out of Robert Spillane on special teams if he is going to be a guy that's going to play, I don't know, give me a snap count, 30 to 40 snaps a game next to Bush?
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you agree with the assessment that it could be that kind of rotation, or do you think if Spillane starts, he's going to be just a starter in base and a nickel?
I'm saying I don't know how it's going to go. I'm saying it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be interesting to come that 53-man roster cutdown time. To see what maybe potentially happens with a guy like Vince Williams, because I don't think if Vince Williams is going to play, how many in your rotation scenario? Let me attack it this way, Alex.
Okay.
In your rotation scenario, on average, how many snaps a game does Vince Williams play on defense?
They played about 360 snaps of base defense last year. That's 22 per game. 22 times 17 is 374.
The listeners were told there would be no math today.
Yeah, heard that before, but 22 a game is about what it averaged out last year. That was a little more on the high end. Actually, nickel and base were used almost equally last year, and so that was a little different than seasons past.
So around 20 what?
About last year came out 22 snaps per game. I guess is if that number were to carry over exactly.
Are you playing Vince any on special teams?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe no longer as the core guy, but I think he can still run down kicks and punts, or at least we'll give him a look and see if he can still do it.
What about Robert?
But he was a great special teamer.
What about Robert Spillane?
Yeah, you may split up those roles half and half and just kind of split everything you're doing with Vince and Spillane 50-50. Because if you're going to play Vince on special teams and he's playing half the time, then you probably do the same with Robert Spillane. But it just depends on can other guys fill those spots and those roles, and what else do you have behind him and those kind of things.
I think once again one of my main takeaways from Spillane's session was, boy, it sure sounds, we don't know what he knows and doesn't know, and once again, if you give the right answers during some of these press conferences, you're going to leave a lot of people in the dark, right? I sure got the feeling that, man, he's got the inside track to be the predominant guy to open the season next to Devin Bush. That was my main takeaway, and because of that, I mean, look, I've probably been the lone guy out there, or one of few, that thinks I'm not necessarily sure that Vince Williams is a lock to make the 53. I mean, obviously I can see scenarios, and your scenario is great, and the rotation quote's great and all like that. But I still don't think it's a slam dunk that Vince Williams makes that final cut, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I understand. I don't think it's written in pen either. I think Spillane's locked in, but I wouldn't quite go as far with Vince Williams, but I still think he's on the inside looking out right now.
Okay,
the way I would phrase things, at least. So, anything else from Spillane you wanted to touch on? Or also there was Chukwuma Okorafor, who said that he doesn't know exactly what he's going to play left or right tackle, ready for anything, but then he kind of let it slip later in the interview that he's playing left side and Banner's on the right side. No surprise there. I think every expectation is that Okorafor is going to be your left tackle for week 1.
Yeah, to wrap up Splayne, I thought it was great. Had a lot of great words to say about Minkah Fitzpatrick and how he's such a great player, and how he helps not only the defensive backs identifying and giving them coverage tips, but says that he's in constant communication with the linebackers as well too. So that was we talked a little bit about Minkah. Kind of that leadership role, right? A couple podcasts ago. I don't mind sticking one of my toes in my mouth there. Minkah looks, to hear Robert Spillane talk, there is a lot. Minkah is doing a good job at being that guy, that leader in the secondary there.
Yeah, and certainly there's been a void there with some of the losses. You still have Joe Hayden, those still have Minkah Fitzpatrick, and those guys will have to step up and work some of those new guys into the fold. But yeah, with Chooks, should be left tackle, and again, just the same comments about Adrian Clem: attack, be physical. That is the preaching that Clem's been giving this offensive line this spring.
You want to talk about a press conference that did a good job of not delivering much information? It's Okorafor, right? I mean, I don't think we learned anything new out of there, and he's got the right attitude of making sure he keeps himself in check. Saying, look, nothing's given. I got to win. Well, refuse to talk about what's going to happen past because obviously this is a contract year for him. Did a great job of conveying that he's not taking anything for granted. And
right.
Yes, we do expect him to be the starting left tackle this year. We do expect this offensive line to be more aggressive, all stuff like that. So, I long and short, I think we just kind of recapped his media session there.
I do think he had one interesting quote talking about the differences between last year and this year under old offensive line coach Sean Surratt and new head offensive line coach Adrian Clem, and this is not the first time we've kind of heard this contrast, but he said, quote, I feel like this year it's more about going downfield. Last year was more about shuffling, walk up to them. Now it's attack, attack, attack. If it's inside zone, outside zone, gap scheme, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be a good year for sure. So we've heard those comments that kind of last year to like the threat, just said block the guy, and now Clem's saying block the guy but run through his face and really have that aggressive mindset in everything you do and everything that you're trying to accomplish as a blocker. So that really seems to be the verbiage and the mentality and the way that it's described is different this year under Clem than it was last year under Coach Sean Surratt.
Yeah, look, I mean, excited to see it, right? Excited to see what maybe this offensive line, any improvements that are made. I mean, especially in the running game.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So I think we recapped and covered those comments pretty well. So we'll take a pause here and come back with our Steelers Depot Roundtable, talking the NFL Draft, talking Pat Freiermuth, Buddy Johnson, with Owen Straley and Josh Carney. And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. As we mentioned at the top of the show, we are having another Steelers Depot Roundtable here with our Steelers Depot contributors. Today we have on Joshua Carney and Owen Straley. Thank you guys for being on. Really looking forward to your insight and recapping, reviewing the Pittsburgh Steelers 2021 NFL Draft. Josh, I'll start with you. How you doing?
Doing good, Alex. How are you?
I'm doing well. You're back in Pittsburgh, right?
No, we're moving end of the month. Yeah,
okay,
so I'll be in Pittsburgh here beginning of July, and hopefully have a new job by then. So we'll see.
Well, also just congrats on your promotion within the site as well, helping
Thank
us out extra on weekends. So we're really excited to have that. Owen Straley, I think you just had your 1-year anniversary or so with Steelers Depot. So congrats on that. And how you doing?
Yeah, doing pretty good. Started right around last quarantine. After my upcoming football season got canceled. Can't say enough good work about all the stuff everyone does here, and jealous you guys talking about living in Steelers country because I'm still out here in Patriots country. It's not
For people that don't know you, Owen, just kind of tell the listeners about yourself. And you are of the crew, the football player of the Steelers Depot staff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I play cornerback up at Bates College up in Lewiston, Maine. It's Division III football, but still run like a good amount of pretty advanced coverages, cover 4, cover 6, pretty much everything you could name. So I feel like it gives me a good insight into how to break down the secondary, but more specifically the cornerback position technically, and then also kind of understanding how difficult their job is. And I think I might maybe a little more positive than some people looking at cornerback play sometimes.
Yeah, and if you followed Owen's work, he's kind of really primarily focused on secondary play, defensive backs. We'll have a lot of discussion about that today. But I want to start with Jonathan and Tom, we talked about Najee Harris. We didn't spend much time talking about the second-round pick, Pat Freiermuth. So I want to start here with Freiermuth to get your guys' thoughts on him. And Josh, I'll start with you. A, did you think it was good value? And B, what do you think, what kind of impact can Freiermuth make in year number 1?
I did think it was good value. I know that on the Roundtable podcast we had before the draft, I thought he was fringe top 50. So getting him at 55 is pretty solid. I think he's pretty comfortably tight end 2 in that class. So to get him at 55, it plugs a need as the second tight end on the Steelers roster. He's gone and obviously replaced Vance McDonald in those snaps primarily as a blocker. But I don't have high expectations for him in 2021. I think he's kind of that security check down tight end. He's not a guy that's going to stretch the seam or come up with those splash plays unless there's a coverage breakdown like we saw at Penn State. But I think he's going to be that blocking tight end, the guy that he's really just going to fill that Jesse James role. He's going to be that security blanket for Ben, hopefully in the middle of the field, kind of move the chains in case defenses focus on JuJu Smith-Schuster again.
Oh, and the big discussion we had, and as Josh mentioned, we talked about Freiermuth extensively pre-draft, talking about, was he the second best tight end, kind of where he fit. Where do you see his ceiling at Freiermuth? Not just this year, but just long-term. What do you think the potential lies with Pat Freiermuth?
Yeah, so I think a lot of Steelers Nation has been trying to make like the Heath Miller comparisons and others, and I kind of agree he's more along the lines of a Jesse James. I don't think he's ever going to be a Heath Miller level blocker. I mean, we remember Heath on the end of the line, but I think what he can at least give you is the ability to play with that inline tight end and not have it be a liability. And I think I was just recently watching some tape from that Washington game. Ebron just completely whiffs on a block at the goal line. Benny Snell ends up getting tackled from like the inches yard line. So I think the ability to at least put bodies on people in the run game is going to make it, a much more versatile attack. And I think especially with the way Canada's coming in, to try to establish more of a two-way attack. I think it could definitely help in that sense. I think he could develop into a tight end one in the future, but maybe not like a George Kittle top of the line tight end one. But I think he could at least be a fringe starter, solid starter in the NFL.
Yeah, that was the fourth down play that Ebron. He just had to get in the way of Chase Young, and he just overset. I'm not sure what happened on that play, and it made the tackle for the stop at the goal line. Dave, George Kittle's name was invoked, so I think by law I have to bring you in here. Your kind of additional thoughts here on Pat Freiermuth.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody is well aware of my thoughts on him right now. Obviously, I think he was tight end 2 in this class. I don't know. I did watch a lot of Tommy Tremble tape, though, and I think the better value might have been when did Tremble go? 3rd round?
Yeah, he was. Man,
I think it was 3rd, but anyway, I had overall, I did have Freiermuth tight end 2 in the class, but I had him more of a kind of a top 75 player than I did, obviously, top 50, top 55 along those lines. Now, however, am I shocked that the Steelers drafted him? No. I mean, you go back, you keep rolling back in your head that Penn State pro day and him and Alfredo Roberts and man, it's like they like they're long lost friends. And obviously Alfredo worked him out at that pro day there. And, we've talked forever that the Steelers needed another all around tight end early in this draft. So I wasn't surprised. I'm just, now that you have them, I'm just curious to see the usage, and that's something Alex and I have talked about a little bit on some previous podcasts here. Can he get to the 400 snap mark? I think that's possible. Can he get up to the 500 mark? Will the Steelers have some leads later in the games to be able to maybe put 2 tight ends on the field or go some heavy type packages on that? So the player fit, obviously. Now we'll just see, his ceiling. I don't think it's all that terribly high. I mean, I think you're talking about a guy that maybe at most catches, 45 to 50 balls a year. And obviously a good red zone threat. If there's anything that we know about Pat Freiermuth coming out of Penn State, he was a hell of a red zone target. And Ben Roethlisberger absolutely loved that. And sure-handed guy as well, too. And after all the drops that we saw this team have last season, that will be a pleasant surprise to get somebody, hopefully, that can catch the football.
To me,
Alex, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, to me, his biggest strength are his hands. And even in rookie minicamp, I saw some highlight reels and just some of the tough, combative, contested catches he made. He's not going to be dynamic, not going to run away from guys, not going to create a ton of space, but it's physical to box out and make that really tough, combative catch. So I think that's, along with the well-roundedness of his game, is probably the best trait of Pat Freiermuth.
I was the one guy I keep coming back to when I watch Freiermuth is Jack Doyle in Indianapolis. Not an overly dynamic tight end, just sure-handed. He's capable at the end of the line. He's just a chain mover. I think people in this fan base are seeing the original nickname for Freiermuth of Baby Gronk, and they're expecting just this superstar tight end. And yeah, he had a great freshman year at Penn State, but that nickname doesn't fit. And I think that people are going to be a little disappointed if they continue to go through this process and expect a Rob Gronkowski-like tight end.
Yeah,
I do think I'll add this a little bit. The further I got into his tape, past the contextualizations and stuff like that, he ended up being a better blocker than what my first couple of times through on. He's not going to put anybody in the first row of the stands, like George Kittle and Tommy Tremble's really aggressive, really effective blocker, but he's above average. I hate to keep going back to Jesse James, but I mean, it's kind of the Porsche version of Jesse James, if there were such a thing. I believe he offers you more than Jesse James, but kind of in that same mold.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Owen, do you think he'll chip away at Ebron's snaps year 1, or do you think it's more of a year 2 thing if Ebron is gone after the season, which is probably the most likely thing to happen?
Yeah, so I think you actually touched on it a lot this season, which is if they're going to go to tight end and they're going to go even just a single tight end, I think Freiermuth has a chance to chip into Ebron snaps there, because I think I could see Ebron used maybe more along the slot this year, where he was used last year, but I think it was just really ineffective when they would try to use him in line, whereas I at least with Freiermuth, especially I've watched a lot of Canada tape of his offenses at LSU and Pitt. And I mean, a lot of it, it's like the threat of the run is going to get that tight end open on like wheels and stuff like that. So I just feel like it's kind of a tell having Ebron in the game. So I think I could see Pat Freiermuth chip away year one. I do agree, though. I think year two is going to be his chance to like really seize that starting role.
That's a good point.
Fourth quarter, 8:30 left in the fourth quarter. Steelers leading by 3, and you want to get that running game going, but you still want to have 11 personnel out on the field. Who are you putting out there?
Yeah, no, I think it's got to be Freiermuth in that situation. At least if it were me. I mean, it's just tough to see Ebron really like putting his hand in the dirt and moving a 4-3 D end off the ball in that situation.
Josh, what do you think?
I think it matters where they're at on the field. If they're kind of backed up in their own end, say around their own 20, I'd prefer Freiermuth is in there. Closer to midfield, Ebron, you can kind of take some shots, but that's a tough question, Dave. Obviously, you want the better blocker in there, but then you run into, are you selling what you're doing in a sense offensively by taking Ebron off the field? So that's something that I think we should pay attention to, because that's probably a question that Matt Canada and the rest of the coaching staff are kind of going through offensively as well.
That's a good point, Owen. And I just want to touch on it here briefly about Ebron maybe playing more in the slot, because, yesterday we hear JuJu talking about he wants to play on the outside more. McCloud might play more in the slot. That's probably not an ideal use of resources for Pittsburgh, but could they have JuJu play on the outside more as the Z and have Ebron in the slot with Freiermuth as the inline wide tight end? That might be a way to get JuJu on the outside while still having a talented slot receiver. Ebron's hands are concerned in the middle of the field, but just a better option probably than a guy like Ray-Ray McCloud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think at least with Ebron, it's similar to JuJu in terms of he can be that big Y where he's getting those second-level releases, lean on some linebackers, have enough strength to move people off. Whereas I do agree. I think McCloud, you'd see him on a lot of drags, a lot of jet sweeps, like get the ball in his hands quickly, but he doesn't have that same. I mean, you can run that over route with Ebron that they love running with JuJu.
Right. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see a lot of weapons, though. And so I think Freiermuth, again, I was just happy with the investment in the position, because they've only drafted 3 tight ends in the top 4 rounds. In the COVID era, it was Heath Miller, Matt Spaeth, and then 13, 14 years later, it was finally Pat Freiermuth. So good discussion there on him. I want to go to 4th-round pick here, Buddy Johnson. I'll admit I didn't know a ton about Buddy Johnson when they first drafted him, but the more I've watched him, the more impressed I've been by his game. Owen, I'll start with you. Just kind of what's your general assessment of Buddy Johnson?
Yeah, so I think, similar mold to Vince Williams, but like I feel like a lot, at least on paper, more athletic. I didn't necessarily, watching him, he's a great block shedder, stays square in the run game, does a good job of coming downhill. I wouldn't say like the 4.57 speed's super evident, and he definitely looks a little stiff at times. But in terms of his man coverage ability, I actually think he's going to be able to offer you something there next to Devin Bush, where, as we know, Devin Bush making the comments about, of course, I can cover Jarvis Landry. So I think you're going to need them to be able to cover. And I think Buddy Johnson, at least if you're putting him on running backs, the occasional tight end matchup, I think he can actually hold up decently well in that. He has solid coverage instincts, closes to the ball well with his speed. But I think I would say I'd like to see the speed and testing numbers maybe show themselves a little more. I think that could maybe come with some NFL coaching.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Josh, where do you see Johnson's year one impact? Is there any chance of him getting a role defensively, or is it primarily a special teams kind of thing?
I think early on it's going to be just special teams primarily. And then as you get closer to the bye week, you might see his workload ramp up. But like Owen said, he's pretty similar to Vince Williams. I had something right after they drafted him. The measurables are pretty darn close. Where Buddy Johnson stands out is the testing numbers. So if you have a guy, Vince Williams size, weight, length, but then a supreme athlete for position, it's a clear upgrade in a sense. But you got to bring him along slowly. I don't want to see him on the field in 3rd down. I don't want to see him covering receivers. When Devin Bush made that comment, I had PTSD with Keenan Allen on John Bostic late in the game. But I think Buddy Johnson's going to really make a name for himself on special teams early on, and people are going to be talking about him. He's a madman, and he's got great athleticism, just flies around. And I think you can see him later on in the season, the Steelers start to work him in defensively next to Bush.
Dave, where do you see as the upside, the ceiling with Buddy Johnson? Is it starter level? Is it rotational guy, backup, special team, or where is the height of his game?
Look, when Vince Williams was drafted, I remember when Vince Williams was at that Senior Bowl, and that's how Vince Williams jumped on my radar, was that massive hit at the Senior Bowl way back when. I was like, oh wow, this, and you start getting because of that one highlight alone, you start jumping in the tape, and then obviously the Steelers went ahead and drafted him. I remember watching back then. It was all game tape, no all 22 and all like that. You could still find a pretty good, especially at Florida State, find a good selection on Florida State tape at a time. The thing that stuck out the most about Vince Williams, I remember about the tape, was, man, that guy could go downhill in a hurry, straight line, no problem whatsoever. The other thing that unfortunately stuck out about Vince Williams is, they pulled him out obviously a lot in sub packages, but when he was on the field in some coverage situations, he really didn't move. The change of direction wasn't there. Now also Vince wasn't a sideline to sideline bullet either. Once again, his primary traits was downhill, heavy thumper, good at reading the run, good at taking on blocks, those kind of things. With Buddy, with the tape that I've gone through on him, he's a good downhill player. And look, I mean, there's I think a couple of the sacks were chasing quarterbacks out of bounds, and a good beeline that way. I don't think he moves downhill like a bullet like Vince did early on in his day. Though he still moves good, don't get me wrong. I do think he's good with the run. I think he's a little bit slow to progress information. That's a part of his game he's going to have to work on. But I think Owen, hit on. I think what you get with Buddy in the coverage department is probably 3 times what you had with Vince Williams when Vince Williams came out. Now, back to your question about kind of what the ceiling is on his. I think a lot of it really depends on which way the NFL continues to go here. I mean, are we going to start seeing, everything comes cyclical in the NFL, right? You get smaller athletes on the field on a defense, opposing offense to start going heavy again. Are we going to start to see the fullback back on all 32 teams again to help combat that a little bit more? He's probably going to be the best option for the Steelers in a base 2-line inside linebacker system starting in 2022, and where it goes from there, I think is kind of up in the air from there. I think he's going to have to play better downhill. I think we're going to have to see better job of hug. One thing I thought Robert Spillane pointed out today that I thought that was a good point. Talking about the hug blitzes and all. I'm not sure we really looked too deep at that with Buddy Johnson when going through his tape. Now, I don't think he had a huge amount of sacks right at Texas A&M, and if I recall, a lot of his were kind of clean up, run out of bound type sacks. So I kind of wonder how his process will be kind of on those, when asked to look. And one thing obviously that I don't need to leave out about Vince Williams is, but that guy was a terror on running backs, having to pass protect him. I mean, Vince Williams, arguably one of the best pass rushing inside 3-4 linebackers in the league. I mean, he could flat out put some linebackers or put some running backs back in the quarterback's lap there. So I view him as an upgrade over Vince Williams, and obviously Vince Williams started several years in the league, right? So 2022, I would think would be the marker on him to do so, and then I'm interested, where it goes from there. It'll be interesting to see.
Sure. I think he's got starting caliber potential in talent. I think he's patient against the run. He plays inside out. And so I mentioned the block deconstruction is good. I think the biggest thing, and Dave touched on it, was the processing. Some of the window dressing, some of the option stuff will get him in a lot of trouble. When he sees the football, he's good. When he has trouble finding it, he's a step slow. Then obviously that's going to be a big problem in the NFL. So I worry about him playing Baltimore, for example, and how that might hurt him. But that hopefully will come with NFL experience and seasoning and coaching there. So any other final thoughts on Buddy Johnson, Josh? I'll let you just one last thought.
Well, real quick, Owen, did you do the coverage? Did Owen do the coverage on Buddy Johnson or no?
Yeah, I did a coverage breakdown on him about a week or two ago. He didn't. I mean, A&M, which I thought was kind of interesting for a college scheme, they didn't run much zone at all. I mean, there's a little bit of cover 3, but for the most part, outside of like subtle hook curl work and cover 3, 90% of it was just man covers. And that's what I was saying. I mean, I thought he held up pretty well in man coverage, disciplined on like angle routes against running backs, but can really run to the football, especially on swing routes. And then he had a couple times covering slot receivers, actually did pretty well in that situation too. So I was pleasantly surprised is the way I described it. And again, he's not, do you want him on receivers? Probably not, but it's not a Vince Williams, Avery Williamson situation where you're like, oh no, he's on a receiver. So I think he could hold up there.
Did you see him have to gain depth a little bit, maybe in some kind of Tampa 2 type situations or anything like that, where he'd have to gain a little bit of depth or run with a guy inside?
Mm-hmm. So not any Tampa 2 from what I saw, but like I said, a little bit of hook curl and cover 3. I thought he did a pretty good job. I mean, he's clean in terms of moving backwards. He's got a clean plant coming forwards, comes downhill well, and then obviously, I would say probably the best aspect of his coverage is he's a very good open field tackler. So even if he's not there to break it up, he's usually going to get the guy on the ground pretty quickly. But just good sideline to sideline speed once he can kind of get there. I'd agree with Alex. It's at times when he can't really see what's going on. Like I think screens at times would like get him in trouble, stuff like that. But overall, I think he better in man than he is in zone at this point in his career. But I think, zone coverage work, it all comes with communication and experience at that point.
All right, we'll move on here to 5th round pick Isaiah Loudermilk, and it was kind of a sleepy time in between. Buddy Johnson, they knew the Steelers weren't picking until late in the 6th round, so you figured it'd be a pretty quiet time in between. Then all of a sudden they move up with Miami to get Loudermilk in a move that really surprised me. I think it surprised a lot of you guys as well. But Josh, I know you wrote the report on Loudermilk, so what's your evaluation of him, and did the Steelers make the right decision on not only picking him but trading up to get Isaiah Loudermilk?
Well, I was definitely a prisoner of the moment when they moved up, and Isaiah Loudermilk's name flashed. I was pretty disappointed. He was one of the few 6'5" and above lengthy 3-techs in the draft, and the Steelers love them and want to get their hands on those guys. His tape's pretty solid against the run, but pass rushing, you're not going to get much there. I know, Alex, you watched him as well. And Dave, I believe you checked him out too. I didn't see much from a pass rush standpoint, but I think he's a classic rotational guy that can, play the run. He can stay on the field in certain situations just by getting his hands up in passing lanes. I think I counted 11, I want to say, over the games that I watched. Just a lengthy guy though, but certainly was surprised by the selection. Didn't like giving up, was it a future 4th to move up to get him?
Yep.
Is that what it was?
Yep, next year's 4th.
Didn't like doing that. And with every pick that they made, I checked mockdraftable.com just to look at the spider charts, and his is not pretty, but I want to wait and see until he gets, some game action in the Steelers scheme. But just based off my initial reaction early on, I didn't like it. But we'll see. I mean, that's why Kevin Colbert gets paid the big bucks, and I am a quote-unquote YouTube scout.
Yeah, and Loudermilk had drop weight, too, for his pro day in the 270s range. And, can only imagine he'll test much worse once he gets back up in the 290s, which is probably where he's right about now. But, Dave, I know you mentioned probably and Colbert said the word Colbert used the most with Isaiah Loudermilk was scarcity, the scarcity of a lineman that was 6'5", 290 with length and solid run defense. And I'm guessing that was the real, well, I'm not guessing, Colbert basically said it was the catalyst to draft and trade up to get Loudermilk, was because there weren't many guys like him in this draft class.
The old planet theory, right? There are only so many guys walking around the planet, 6'5", 6'6", 200, 290. His natural weight's probably 290 to 300, right? 305, right around in there. And Alex, I remember us right almost from the get-go, the conversations we had. I mean, just early on, diving into prospects and all, saying, where are those 4'5" techs that 300 pounds, 6'5" that the Steelers normally like? And I think Florida State had one, and trying to remember, I think one of the small schools kids had one, and that was it. It sure gives you the feeling, though, that, man, there's not many guys like this that fit kind of what we do. And one other thing about in Loudermilk's defense, sort of, had a couple of knee issues, and I think even in before the final bowl game against, was it Maryland, tweaked a knee or something. I think that's what ended up getting him held out of the bowl game. I think Dr. Mel talked about that in her terrible take a couple of weeks ago there. And him doing the old drop weight thing. Who knows with COVID how his training went and all like that. He obviously didn't put up the best of measurables, and who knows how healthy he was on top of it. Now, when going a little bit deeper into tape, the positives, some of the positives I think that stuck out to me. He's got a nice push pull on the outside, especially when against guards and tackles. There, he does a good job, I think, of sometimes he's inconsistent with his hands, but when he does get those hands inside, he's got a nice push pull move, and Cameron Hayward's got a nice one of those as well too. It'd be nice to see him use that length of his though. Develop a long arm. If you've got the length on somebody, you got to be able to use it. If you got the size hands that he has, you got to be able to use it. The hips, I've seen worse hips. I mean, I think he does a pretty decent job of getting those hips. They're not Stephon Tuitt hips, but there was the comp. Who was the one that threw it out there? The cross between Hayward and Wormley. Whose words were those?
Well, Keith Butler had made a reference to some sort of poor man's version of Cam Hayward.
Yeah, obviously not on the level. I can see a lot of Chris Wormley in there, to be honest with you, and maybe a tad bit, a tiny bit of Cameron Hayward there. But make no mistake about it, he's got some developing to do, man. And the fact that you traded up to get him. I mean, I don't say that you have to keep him on your 53, but boy, it sure would be something to go through that rigmarole, trade up, getting him, not make you 53, and then 7 months into the season he gets snatched. Right. 7 weeks into the season, I should say.
Oh, and do you see him fitting into this rotation at all? I mean, it's a pretty crowded defensive line group with Wormley and Tyson Alualu returning. Do you see him getting snaps anywhere, or is this kind of a stash and more of a, let him redshirt effectively this year and play in 2022?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you guys touched on it pretty well in terms of it's just the scarcity of the guys. And I mean, especially you look around the league, not a lot of teams really play that true 3-4 in the way that Pittsburgh does. A lot of like amoeba fronts like you see down in Miami. So I think that kind of that, especially in college too, like that style of defender is not really being recruited anymore. So I think just the ability for him to be there. And I think they, I don't know about him playing this year. I think it's more of a kind of like you said, draft and stash, where get him a guy with similar measurables in the building, see if he can work with Tuitt and Hayward specifically, maybe get that long arm. And the biggest thing for me, he's got to be a little more nasty. Like, I like his block shedding. I like his ability to hold the point of attack. He gets into the backfield well at times. But he doesn't really seem to have that mean streak that you see a guy like Hayward have, where he's just ragdolling O-linemen, really putting some physicality into back. So I think he could use – I don't even know if it's adding strength. I think it's just kind of the mentality of it. But I could maybe see him working into the rotation. I wouldn't say – Wormley played well in week 17 in a couple of games where he got more extensive snaps, but I didn't think his rotation work was anything where it was above replacement. I mean, Alu, Hayward, and Tuitt obviously are – that's kind of your cornerstones along the line. And then Carlos Davis, too, I think is definitely a guy that should see some time at some points next year. But I could see Loudermilk stealing some snaps maybe toward the latter portion of the season. Just
to follow up on that, you talked about the need for maybe Loudermilk's mentality to change a little bit. In your experience being in these locker rooms, is that possible? Or are guys usually that mentality, whoever they are, is just how they're going to be wired? Or have you seen that mentality change with the right coaching over a couple of years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it can definitely change with the right coach. I think it's a lot of guys are motivated differently. So I think sometimes, maybe it's screaming a guy's face. Sometimes I think where it might help at the NFL level is you got a lot more coaches on the staff. You maybe get a guy to work with him a little more one-on-one, figure out like what makes him tick, what's not working with him, what's not clicking. And maybe a redshirt type year could maybe get him going into year 2, where then he's ready to contribute to the rotation. And then hopefully down the line, serve as some level of replacement for Cam Hayward whenever he walks out the door, although I wouldn't say I'm super optimistic on that level.
Yeah, same here. Josh, do you see, because the concern with me is just the lack of ceiling, because, this was 2003, he'd be perfect. But in this day and age of one gapping and flowing against outside zone schemes, and just being a good pass rusher in general, he's not going to check those boxes. So is that your main concern, is kind of the lack of the upside? Or are you, if all he becomes is a rotational guy, then that's not bad for a 5th round pick. But where do you see maybe that upside at?
Yeah, that's pretty much where I see it. Unless he just goes through a massive transformation and learns how to use his hands consistently and tap into that length and kind of change his mentality, like Owen was saying. I think his ceiling is a rotational guy who could see an increase in snaps due to injury. I think he's going to come off the field in the NFL on pass rushing downs, because you're not going to keep a guy out there just to say, hey, kind of hover around the line of scrimmage and get your hands up. You got to be able to get after the quarterback. I don't feel like there's a ceiling there. And I think that to me, it felt like they could have waited and saved that 4th round pick from next year and maybe snagged him later in the draft instead of doing what felt like to me was a panic move up to get, one of those Planet Theory guys like Dave was mentioning.
Remember Nick Williams?
Right, from Sanford.
Yeah. I mean, he ended
developed up after he left.
Long after 2019. 6 sacks. I don't know what happened to him last year. I think one sack. I don't know. Maybe he got beat out on some playing. I mean, he's 30 years old now, believe it or not. But I mean, they cut bait on him kind of quick, seemingly, right? The Steelers did, and he ended up. I mean, I think that's a rare instance of someone developing late and giving you something. If he can develop into any sort of backup rotational guy that gives you 18 snaps during a game, I mean, I don't see how you ask for anything. If he gives you anything more than that, I think great. Obviously, I don't think he's going to play, barring injury. I don't think he's going to play much. He's going to be on the inactive list every week, more than likely, barring injuries, and assuming he makes the 53-man roster. And then I think you kind of look toward next season to see, when somebody, Alu might be gone. We'll see what happens with Wormley and all like that. That, obviously will probably present a better opportunity for him then. But I think you use this as a red shirt year for sure. You get him around Cameron Hayward and Stephon. I'd have him living with him, with both those guys if I could. And I'm sure the wives would have something to say about that. But not much of a technician. Obviously, I don't think. A little bit of robotic to him. I think he thinks a lot out there, but there are the traits, like I said, you see some nice push pull on the outside. I think as Owen said, some nice plays against the run as well too. So I mean, this is a total developmental guy. It's just, are we sure he wouldn't have been there in the 6th?
Right.
Yeah, that's my question. It's did we really need to trade a future 4th for this guy? But we'll see. I mean, he certainly has the size and the length, but the tape just doesn't match what they gave up for him, in my opinion.
Dave's over there trying to stretch that Hayward grocery bill. It's already probably high enough at the Hayward house.
He's got trust me, he's got the money for it.
That's true. Let's move on now to 7th round pick, the only defensive back the Steelers drafted, though there's a slew of undrafted guys we'll talk about here in a moment. I know Josh and Owen, both of you guys have done extensive breakdowns on 7th round pick from Oklahoma, Trey Norwood. Owen, I want to talk about and just kind of focus on the scope of your analysis in the article you wrote was his versatility. I know Josh talked about the play and the skill set, but just from a versatile standpoint and from what kind of hats can he wear, it sounds like Norwood really has that leg up because he can line up all over the defensive secondary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. So he started his career off actually as a boundary corner and got pretty good work in there, considering, I mean, he's not the greatest athlete on earth, but particularly in off coverage, he has 2 things that you can't teach: patience and eye discipline, and it consistently puts him in place to make plays. I mean, he finishes decently well. He's got good ball skills at the point of attack, and then kind of like Minkah, he sort of had that like stuff you can't teach where he's just always in place to get these tip balls. And I thought, as far as roles, I was at least optimistic that he might be able to serve as a dime backer in sort of that Sutton role that Sutton's now going to probably be leaving to move down to the outside. And then also if, say, Malik Hooker or somebody who I think Malik Hooker would definitely be an upgrade over Trey Norwood, if they can't sign a free safety backup, I think Trey Norwood has shown that he's able to play that post safety in Pittsburgh. The way they play a lot of cover 1, a lot of cover 3. So he can at least do a serviceable job giving you a backup free safety, which isn't on this roster right now. As far as what I think the best role for him, I think he'll compete for the slot corner role and he'll compete for the dimebacker role. I tend to think dimebacker might be the better role out of the two for him. He's not the most physical player, but definitely solid coverage instincts. I'd say better in man than zone, but definitely a serviceable coverage player in both aspects.
Yeah, I think his roster spot, his chances got squeezed a bit when they signed Arthur Millette, who seems to have that similar skill set, can play free safety, can play slot corner, but obviously has the NFL experience. Josh, the concern I have with Norwood is just, and no one mentioned, is the lack of physicality. I think he averaged probably just a little more than a tackle a game last season. And so do you see that as being something that'll, be too much of an obstacle in his career? Or do you think the instincts and the things that Owen highlighted will be enough to overcome him not being the most physical run stopper?
I think that really depends on the role. I mean, if he's that dimebacker or that slot corner, I'm very concerned when it comes to physicality because you need that guy to be able to come downhill and fill running lanes. And that's not something that he did very well at Oklahoma. He was diving at a lot of ankles when he'd come downhill. But I think if he's kind of that boundary corner or that backup free safety, like Owen mentioned, those instincts and discipline, it's going to just help him latch onto a roster and stick long term. But I think if you try and make him that dime backer or that slot corner just based on his ball skills alone, I think you can be in trouble defensively because he's just not going to stick his face in there and make plays against the run.
Mm-hmm. If there's any sort of optimism, though, and if you talk about the Cam Sutton came in, he was not a super physical guy. Really, the last 2.5 years, I'm not sure what changed. Maybe the urgency of the moment. He became a lot more physical guy and isn't, a Mike Hilton level, but much better than where he was at. So it is possible that he could improve. Dave, again, where do you just see his role in Norwood's chances of making the team? Because there are a lot of spots open, but there's also a lot of competition fighting for those couple available spots.
Yeah, of all the draft picks, he's probably the one, or he is the one that I've watched the less amount of tape on. So I've been kind of following along a lot on what Josh and Owen have written on him so far. The tackling effort is there, just the ability, just not an overly great, I don't think he's afraid to come up and tackle. I mean, he's no Gerard Holloman.
I was waiting for that name to get dropped, seeing who's going to do it.
But that poor kid is always going to be a fantasy magazine draft pick from the Steelers perspective, and probably Sinquez Golson as well too. Both those guys, I think they got enamored with the stats. And drafted him out of the back of the magazine. I know they didn't, but it sure does kind of feel like it. I mean, I remember back right after Holloman was drafted, you and I having conversations saying, "Man, you sure they watched the right tape on this kid?" Because he had no goal to be a leading tackler or even second leading tackler on a team there, and that got him shipped out right away there. Obviously not that bad. I think he likes to come in and shoulder tackle a little bit. If memory serves me, doesn't necessarily wrap up. My biggest question and obviously the picks that I think the picks weren't bad quality picks that he had last season, playing I believe more of a safety role there. The athleticism, obviously, a lot to be desired there. I would shift this back to Owen, really, with this really a question. We hear all the time, and I think we heard it today from Robert Spillane saying Mike Tomlin does a great job of putting players in positions that help them best succeed and win. All right. So if we were to take that same mentality and you are Mike Tomlin, Owen, where do you put a guy like Trey Norwood on the field that gives him the best opportunity to succeed and win in the defense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, so as we talked about, the lack of physicality is definitely a real issue. So I think free safety. I mean, you can say, I mean, it's an instinctual position and whatnot, but I think you look at Minka. Minka's got to make a lot of tackles. So I don't think free safety is a great role until he kind of gets over whatever that is holding him up there. I think nickel corner, especially the way the Steelers use it, you got a lot of blitzing, a lot of filling in the run game off the edge. Whether it's Hilton or, I mean, even when it was Sutton, he did a pretty decent job of it. Back to William Gay, he was involved in the run game. So I think, to me, it comes back to that dime backer position because they're not using dime really that much outside of 3rd and 6+ situations. So I think you see Sutton, he can get away with, you're constantly going to be in man coverage or maybe, some hook curl. Even what I think he'd be great at is they'll use a little invert cover 3 where they'll actually drop that dime backer to the deep third, buzz both safeties down. I think he gives you a guy that can occupy that deep third. He has the range to get back there from there. So I think you want to use him in a sub-package role where he's not going to be asked really to tackle. I mean, obviously he's going to have to tackle at some point, but you don't want him really getting involved in the box. I'd say my biggest holdup with him making the team is I don't think he's going to be able to help you out on special teams at all. So I think compared to some of the other rookies, maybe a Shakir Brown or somebody who's a little more physical probably could give you some help on the kickoff and punt units. I think that's where Norwood's biggest holdup is going to be.
What do you think of Minka as a tackler right now?
I mean, I like Minka's tackle. I think he's a fundamental tackler. I think the angles at times, there's the Tennessee example. There's the Miles Sanders long touchdown example. There's a couple times where the angles can be a little off, but overall, I mean, he squares people up. He's physical. You see the Washington game. There's a stop where you got Logan Thomas coming full speed. Minka squares him up and keeps him out of the end zone at the 1 yard line. And he's also, I mean, he's just a ball hawk. I mean, he's always looking to get his head on the football. You don't see the punch outs necessarily as much as with Sutton, but I think you see the attempts for him. So I would say I trust Minka as a tackler, and he's at least a serviceable back of the line option. And then his playmaking more than makes up for it, in my opinion.
Alex, what size of kind of realm, I guess, or how far distance from the time he was drafted, what distance have you traveled with Norwood so far?
I'm not sure I understand the question. What distance have I traveled?
Yeah, basically, where were you initially with him after he was, the first week after he was drafted to where are you now with him?
I'm kind of in the same place. If you're not going to be physical, you're not going to be a good tackler, and you're going to struggle against the run, it's hard to play in this defense because really across this whole defense, there aren't bad tacklers, there aren't bad run support. Even the outside corner, Steven Nelson, I think was a really strong run-stopping corner. Joe Hayden, to me, is one of the best run-stopping corners in football. Edmonds has his value because he can fill the alley. Minka, as Owen said, I think is a competent, serviceable tackler. So if you're the weak link, it's going to be difficult to have a role and earn that trust from the coaching staff. Now, I agree. If you're in dime packages and you're playing in 3rd and 6+, then that's going to mitigate that. But just overall, are you going to earn that coach's trust to be the next man up if there's an injury or something else happens? So I just have my reservations, especially given all the competition. You have 4 or 5 undrafted guys. You have Arthur Millette and whoever else emerges. I think I like the odds of one of those guys beating Norwood out.
I do wonder if there's an opportunity that, if he doesn't make the 53-man roster and he lands on the practice squad, that they maybe try and work him at corner again. And Owen, my kind of question to you is, did you like him more at boundary corner early in his career? Because I keep having, plays from that Oklahoma State game as a freshman pop up when he was on the boundary. I mean, they only shifted him from what I remember due to the knee injury, and that was 2 years ago. So, he doesn't look like a different player. I wonder if there's an opportunity there on the practice squad to say, okay, we liked you at boundary corner too. Let's give you some work there. Where are you at with his ability as a boundary corner compared to that ball hawking free safety in a sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. So I mean, like I said, I like his mechanics as a defensive back. I think he's smooth out of a variety of techniques. He's good in shuffle technique. He's got a pretty smooth pedal, solid sink and drive, and closes on the ball well because, like I said, good eye discipline, good patience. He'll keep himself in phase. But I think similarly, the lack of physicality can show up at the corner spot too, where he's not – I haven't really seen too much press work or at least any press work that was like overly impressive. And then second of all, he can just kind of get pushed away at the top of routes. I think that would scare me against like a AJ Brown. And there's a lot of receivers in the league that are of that more physical mold. But I do kind of agree. He seems a little more natural at the boundary corner position than he did at the free safety position. And also, I mean, a lot of his tape from the past season, it's similar to a guy like Kerry Vincent Jr. He was never a full-time starter at another position that wasn't corner. So I think maybe see him get a little more work in a lot of places, but I don't think corner would be a bad place to start him, especially with the kind of flux the team's in at the position right now.
Is his major trait just playmaking, ball awareness? I mean, is that his number one? If you were to, start listing the pros and cons with him, what's pro number one with him?
Mm-hmm. I would probably lean towards that. I mean, he's good ball skills, but I would say, coverage ability to always be around the football. But yeah, he's definitely someone who consistently puts himself in the right places. So I'd say, coverage, ball skills in that like Eddie Jackson, Minka sense where he just seems to always be in position for those tip balls. And I know so many fans watch that on TV and they're like, oh, lucky interception. But like, I've played for a long time. I think I've had one or two tip ball interceptions in my career. Like some guys are just, they know where to be. They kind of have a sense for the way the ball's coming off the hands. And I think he's one of those guys. So I'd say just the ability to consistently be in the right place. I don't know if it's necessarily ball skills, because I think there's times where I saw him downfield lose track of the football or not be able to play receiver at the apex. But I think overall he seems to be a guy who you can tell he's played offense at times in his career. He seems to track the ball well and just really the ability to consistently be around the football.
You talked about being in the right place at the right time. I just dug up all 6 or 7 of Malik Hooker's interceptions today. It's the same way there's no, oh my God, I can't believe, he's around the football when it's up in the air. And if it's close to him, it's his, man. There wasn't any. There was the one, I think, undercut in the game against the Chargers, 2019.
One-hander.
Yeah, the one-hander in the end. Rivers tried to sneak that ball in there. Malik undercut it one-handed. That was by far. I mean, that in relation to his other interceptions that he's had at the NFL level, and I've seen one or two. I mean, he had a couple of nice ones, I think, at Ohio State. Trying to go off my memory here, but at the NFL level, I mean, he is a guy that around. The ball always seems to find him when it's in the air. It's not so much that he's doing a good job in coverage. I think it's just, man, he's in the right place at the right time, and that if that ball's up in the air, it's his.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with Norwood. I know that he had 2 solid interceptions throughout his career. There was the one against Florida that he jumped in the slot and took back for a pick 6 in the bowl game. I'm just going back through the profile I did. There was one, I want to say it was against Ohio State. Oklahoma State that he undercut, but he's constantly around the football, and that's what I wrote in the report. Was just that jumps off tape that he's always around the action as a defensive back. So I think he's a practice squad guy for sure, but I think he could develop into something, whether it's at corner or at free safety. But certainly intriguing.
The question I would pose, and I understand the idea of he's around the football in terms of a playmaker, catching tip passes, stuff like that. But how does a guy who's always around the football with great instincts have 23 tackles in 10 games last season? I mean,
that's kind of that's kind of the dilemma. It's like you're always there, but you aren't making tackles.
That pros and cons I just said, that's way down at the pecan. That's number one con. Now, once again, I don't, and let me just qualify this once again. The 3 of you have probably watched a lot more tape on him than I have, but my initial reaction is, yeah, he's willing to do it, but he damn sure ain't great at it. And when it comes to the tackling aspect of his game,
and that's going to hurt on special teams, as Owen mentioned. Right? You're going to get that trust there. You miss a tackle, Danny Smith's not going to be a happy man.
Right.
Let's talk about. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. You're fine.
Just one last thought on that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it can improve. I think one of the biggest issues I see with him is you're always taught to kind of like, you close at an angle, track to the near hip, and really don't stop your feet through contact. I think I see him a lot. He gets up to that like 5-yard cushion range, and then he starts chopping the feet. And you're just at that point, you're giving this guy so much room to wiggle you, so much room to build up power to go through you. And I think if he could just kind of learn to really close space actively, and I mean, again, I think that could come with better coaching, more reps, but I'm just there's certainly a lack of overall physicality to his game.
Right.
Where I don't know if he's ever going to be that guy who just wants to hit somebody. Really.
I mean, it can improve, and it did with Cam Sutton, but will Norwood have that kind of time? Sutton's a 3rd-round pick, Norwood's a 7th-round pick. I mean, you could be gone 3 months from now. So can it improve quickly enough? Will you have that time to do it is I think, a big question.
I think the problem with him, too, is he doesn't wrap up well. A lot of it's, I'm going to throw a shoulder into a guy, try and take his legs out, and doesn't use his arms. And that's obviously a concern. That's not going to fly in the NFL. So I think technique's a big part of it, kind of like Owen was talking about. Really wrapping up and wrestling that guy to the ground will certainly help. But we didn't see that at Oklahoma. It was a lot of, I'm going to throw my shoulder into you and hope that I cut you down here. And it didn't work.
He did. He did. He apparently had an interception in practice in OTAs the other day. It's on his Instagram account. So if he keeps having those, the more of those that he can have, the longer he can stick around.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to mention was, he's going to have 4 games to try and show off those ball skills and make some plays, in the preseason. And he's going to have to get an interception or two to increase his chances. But if
he's going to have to impress the living, out of Danny Smith. I think that's where he's obviously going to be down the depth chart there, and he better buy Danny Smith early some early Christmas presents there, because I think first and foremost he's going to have to be able to play on at least 2 of the special teams units. To have a fighting chance, because you're not going to be a 3rd or 4th safety on this 53-man roster and not play on teams. End of story.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about the rest of the defensive backs here, the guys that were not drafted, because as soon as the draft ended, the Steelers brought in 4 of their 8 undrafted free agents, plus DeMarcus Acey, a first-year player, were defensive backs. Some really intriguing names there, Owen. You've done a lot of study and film work on Shakur Brown out of Michigan State, probably the most popular undrafted free agent that fans and analysts have talked about in relation to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So what's your assessment of Shakur Brown?
Yeah, and so initially, when I was in the initial draft process looking at guys I wanted to review, I always look at 40-yard dash, the quick 5-10-5, and then their 10-yard split's probably the biggest one I look at. And not only was his 40-yard dash pretty slow at the 4.6, but I think his 10-yard split was like sub 1.6 too. So he didn't seem like he was going to be a super explosive guy. And watching his film, I was honestly genuinely surprised by his ability to not only play in the slot and play zone coverage like I had read about, but he's a pretty solid press man coverage defender on the outside, where he's physical, he's patient, and he's actually challenging receivers at the line of scrimmage, daring them to beat him deep. And more often than not, I don't see him getting like straight ran pass downfield. I think, again, we talk about ball skills, not only ball skills to undercut and get interceptions, but he's very physical at the point of attack. You see him punch a lot of balls out, whether that be in the run game more often. Receiver catches it, he comes through, knocks the ball out pretty quickly. So I think he could at least have the chance to offer you some inside-outside versatility, which they could really use at a time where you got a guy like Sutton who's got outside versatility. And Joe Hayden's really the only guy out of this cornerback room who's entrenched in one spot right now. So I think Brown's at least going to give you a little bit of ability to do both. And as far as where I'm looking at it right now, I would say he's probably my favorite to win that nickel job. I think it's either he wins the nickel job or you got a guy like Pierre winning that outside job as the 3rd corner, and then Sutton bounces inside. But I have a feeling the team might want to try to move Sutton into more of a boundary role.
Yeah, I was impressed by Brown because he actually has that true slot experience. He's not this small outside corner who's going to kick inside for the first time in the NFL. He has that true experience in the slot. Not a ton of it, but a good amount of it overall. He's got just a good process and field instincts as the overhang defender, getting depth, a good feel of routes behind him. And so that's something you don't always see from college corners. Josh, I know you've done breakdowns and talked about Shakur Brown as well. What's your sentiment and thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think he's in the driver's seat for that nickel job, like Owen talked about. Just a guy that's physical, can line up anywhere on the defense. he's the classic guy where you let the film speak for itself and you don't just go off the testing, because if you looked at testing alone, it's like, yeah, this guy, he's not an NFL player, but consistently every Saturday in the Big Ten, he was locking down the opposing team's top guy, whether that was on the boundary or on the inside. He has that makeup and that ability to play a number of roles. I was shocked that he went undrafted. I had a 4th round grade on him. I know a lot of people had that late day 2, early day 3. But again, I think a lot of teams saw that testing and said, yeah, we're not going to touch a corner with those type of numbers. And it worked out for the Steelers. I definitely think he's the nickel guy. He's going to try and replicate what Mike Hilton did, at least early on. But to be able to get that type of value as an undrafted free agent is just insane. And I think Owen the other day did just an awesome job profiling
fantastic.
Brown.
It's unreal. Fantastic.
It was. I mean, I can't wait from it. Just like I learned so much about a corner in a specific role just off that one piece. And I'm excited to see what he can do in game action. So I know I kind of rambled there, Alex. I'm sorry.
No,
but,
you're fine.
I'm thrilled that he's a Steeler as a UDFA, and I'm excited to see what he can do in this system, because the ceiling is pretty high with him, in my opinion.
Dave, Josh, and Owen pretty high on Brown's chances not only to make the team, but to make an impact on the defense right away. There certainly is a pretty lack of depth as in terms of slot options. Do you agree that Brown could make a serious run, not only to make the team, but to be in that slot role in some capacity as a rookie in 2021?
Boy, when you talk about trying to buy the Willy Wonka golden ticket, man, for $25,000, what was his? That was his signing bonus, wasn't it? $25,000. Do you remember?
I believe it was.
So. Yeah, it was.
For that's a heck of a purchase. A heck of a lottery ticket purchase right there, and I think it's a good one there. And man, I keep going back to once again, boy, if anybody wants to learn about Shakir Brown, go search out Owen Straley's film room from what was it, June 3rd or something, I think, June 2nd, June 3rd on Steelers Deep, because it's just absolutely fantastic to show you what he can do, especially in man coverage. And man, if with Mike Hilton out the door, and what have we talked about, and Steven Nelson gone, and if indeed Cam Sutton's going to be now your guy on the outside, man, you really need this to hit, man, and you almost need to. I think you almost have to force it to fit initially. To be honest with you, I think you got to put him in there and let him sink and swim a few times there first, because obviously cutting his teeth initially is probably going to. Now I don't know, as far as I haven't done enough research on his football IQ. Maybe Owen has. But one thing that here's the things that stuck out to me when I've looked at his tape. I don't, it's almost like Isaiah McCoy, and obviously TV tape, sometimes you don't get the, it's hard to pick up, the overall speed and athletic. I mean, you can see the athleticism on the stop on the dime and the change of direction. I think he has that. I'm trying to find out why he tested so poorly in that. And also I don't see really that, the lack of speed either. I think he has a nice burst. Overall there, I think he's more than a willing, tackler. I mean, sometimes when you draw him up in these 3rd, 4th, 5th round corners that the Steelers like, sometimes, he kind of fits in that mold there. So, and the other thing that stuck out to me, man, he just has that kind of that sixth sense, I think, that I don't know if it's being able to read the receiver's eyes or mannerisms or what. He knows he's got a good sense of when the ball is in the air, I feel, and does a great job of staying in phase long enough and getting that head around to find it on top of it there. So, man, I mean, if you're a Steelers fan, I think you're of all the undrafted free agents, you really hope this kid hits, and I think there's a good chance of it doing just that.
Yeah, when he posted that 4.65, I immediately went back to the tape, because I know that he matched up with Josh Umatabebe from Illinois, who's just a physical freak at receiver. I never saw any issues with his speed, agility, his initial burst. So I don't think it's come out that he was hurt when he tested, but something happened that day for him to have those numbers drop, but it doesn't show up on tape, which is very confusing.
Owen, have you been able to find it on tape? Instances where, okay, I see this here, which matches with some measurables.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think one of the biggest things I kind of noted it in the report is he's just so patient at the line of scrimmage, and he's one of the few guys I've seen at the college level that's actually playing press coverage out of the slot, where he's forcing these receivers off their path where they're not really building speed off the line of scrimmage. So I don't think he necessarily has to really ever hit his top speed too quickly. By the time he does, he's kind of connected with them. He's able to chop their hands, slow their speed down. So I don't know if he's as slow as like the 4.6, but I don't think he wins as a speedy corner. I think he wins through his patience and physicality going down the field too. I mean, you see on a lot of these, like he's widening them beyond the numbers. He's leaning on them, pushing them out of bounds, like chopping their hands down to like slow their speed. He's just a very, very technical corner. And I mean, especially for a guy coming out, like I don't think you see many guys with his level of technique, especially not that are going undrafted. Because I mean, in terms of just like pure patience, I mean, I was watching guys earlier like Surtain and Horn and guys like that and Newsome, but like there was, I mean, a lot of these mid-round guys, they were not showing that same level of patience. So I did not go into his film expecting him to be as good as he was in man coverage. And then also, as Alex kind of touched upon, really good as that underneath overhang defender, which is a big thing in Pittsburgh. You saw Cam Sutton almost have multiple picks this year as that overhang defender, one in the Tennessee game, I believe one in the Bengals game later in the season. So I think he's really got an ability to be a playmaker here. And then lastly, he actually has shown some chops as a blitzer, which is a complete necessity in the Keith Butler defense, where he sends nickels probably more than anyone in the league.
Can he maybe be a better slot? I mean, apologies, Mike Hilton. I'm a huge Mike Hilton fan, and boy, it sure does stink to lose him, especially his play against the run and his knack to blitz off the edge. But in totality, Mike Hilton wasn't all that super great in coverage, right?
I would say the main difference with him and Hilton is Hilton was solid underneath. It was just when he would get downfield, he was not only so short, but it just felt like a lot of the time he was losing sight of the ball and he'd kind of get boxed out at the top of the route. You really don't see that with Brown. And even though the vert number, like his testing numbers just weren't great, but he consistently high points the ball and he's getting it over receivers that are like 6'4". So I think he just like you kind of talked about, he's got that really good knack of receivers' hands go up. He's going up in unison. He's not only going to play the hands, but he's playing it. He wants it to be his football. So I think he's going to probably create more turnovers than Hilton in the pass game and also be better, against those seam balls that seem to kill Hilton for years.
It just feels like, reading Owen's piece from last week, Brown is consistently in phase. That's what I took away. He's always right there with the receiver downfield. Whether that's a hand on him, chopping at his hands, like Owen mentioned, he's just always there. I never really see clear separation from the opposing receiver. Is that kind of where you're at, Owen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, it's kind of like I talked about. I think a lot of people look at the cornerback position like you need to be, one of the fastest, like twitchiest athletes out there. And I think one of the biggest things that helped me improve my game and that I really look for in all these guys is the ability to just, when that receiver comes off the ball and he starts giving you all the head fakes and all this, the ability to just sit there and force him to either go right or left, but take him off his path. And then at that point, once he's off his path, you've not only dictated where his landmark's going to be, you've changed his landmark, you've messed up the timing with the quarterback, and you just make it a more difficult throw. Because, I mean, they're used to, especially quarterbacks and receivers, they practice on air. They're not used to, okay, now you've been widened, now you got to throw it outside of the numbers. He's not used to making that throw. The receiver's not used to the ball being here. So he's just really good at just disrupting timing and disrupting where the receiver is going to end up trying to catch the football.
I wish we had more time to talk about each other individual undrafted player specifically, but just as a group, because there are interesting names here with Mark Gilbert, Donovan Steiner, Lamont Wade. Oh, and I'll pose the question to you, kind of the other guys not named Shakur Brown who were signed after the draft, who is most intriguing to you? Mm-hmm.
So I guess most intriguing, I mean, originally, so Mark Gilbert, you talk about a sticky guy in coverage. If you look at some of that 2017 tape, he is sticky in coverage. It's almost effortless the way he can just. He's not as physical as Shakir at the line, but he's just more of a patient, matches people off the line, gets into their hip very easily, can really sit down easily. But a lot like Trey Norwood, Mark Gilbert is just real lack of physicality in the run game, and leads me to believe that he's not going to be much of a guy on special teams again, like we talked about. It makes it really tough for me to see him making the roster. And then I think a guy that I haven't had a chance to watch a ton of, but I was honestly genuinely impressed with in the 2 to 3 games I've watched was Steiner. And I think Steiner might be, if you're looking for another guy to compete for that like dime backer role that I had spoken about with Norwood, dime backer, maybe with the ability to back up at the safety position too. I think Steiner's a more physical, maybe not as great in coverage, but could give you something on special teams too. So I think Steiner and Norwood, Millette, like that's all going to be a good battle between them.
Josh, what do you think? Any other undrafted free agents that catch your attention?
I don't want to write off Lamont Wade when it comes to that defensive back battle. He's got that position versatility, that special teams experience at Penn State. Obviously, was a bit of a disappointment at Penn State coming out of the Pittsburgh area as a 5-star prospect. Didn't quite live up to the hype, but I mean, he can return kicks. He can play in the slot. He can play in the box. I know that he played boundary corner for a bit at Penn State and then moved to safety. Tackling is an issue. It's not for a lack of want to. It's just technique and overall size and strength. But he's a guy I think that could wear a lot of hats and kind of grab one of those back end roster spots just because of the way he could be used on a number of teams within the Steelers. So,
Dave, what about you? Any other? I know we've talked about it some, me and you, but just undrafted guys that have caught your attention, at least defensively.
Yeah, not so much defensively, and not a lot of that tape really has stuck out to me outside of Shakir Brown. I mean, you know where I am on Isaiah McCoy,
right.
and I think who was it? Jonathan Tritter this morning did a great. Was it this morning or yesterday? I get my days confused. Did a great piece, an extended film room on Isaiah McCoy, and there's a good chance this kid could be. I don't think he obviously makes the roster this year. I think he's more of a practice squad guy, but could this potentially be the next kind of James Washington type player here? And of all their undrafted free agents, the ones that I have that caught my eye the most are obviously Shakir Brown, and I've obviously been attracted to Isaiah McCoy, and that's another one that I just think, man, I mean, 4.6, man, I don't see it really on the tape, because he sure doesn't seem to have a problem getting loose, and he's another kid that can contest and catch. Obviously, the route tree's not all that super diverse. I mean, but as far as somebody that can stretch the field and give you some contested catches down the field, about what James Washington's doing, right now. So. That's the other one. Him and Shakir Brown are the two that I've spent the most time on.
Last question I want to pose to both Josh and Owen, just to if you kind of sum up just your overall thoughts and feelings on the Steelers draft. Not that you have to give it a grade, but just kind of, do you feel like it was a successful draft based on the guys that they took or not? Josh, I'll start with you. Just kind of your overall evaluation of this draft class.
Yeah, I like the first two, obviously with Najee Harris and Pat Freiermuth. I was a little thrown off by the Kendrick Green, but the more I watched of him, the more he fits. I think it was just a solid class. I know that they're getting crushed nationally for grabbing a running back, in the first round, but I mean, they addressed a lot of needs, and you never want to draft for need, but with this roster and win now, it's kind of what they had to do. And I think they plugged a lot of holes, at least on paper. So pretty pleased with it overall. I mean, I'm not expecting, like 2017, where there was a bunch of potential all pros in the first 3 rounds, but just a solid class overall. Loudermilk is still the one where I'm kind of like, I don't really understand.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. And I think 3 years from now, they're going to have a number of starters from this class, and that's really all you can ask for.
Oh, and Josh uses the word solid. Would you agree with that word, or do you come in higher or lower on this group?
No, I think solid's a good way to sum it up. I think, especially going into, like I said, I took some time and watched a lot of different like full games of a Matt Canada called offense. And I mean, you look at that offensive line last year, not only offensive line, but the running back group, they just would not have been able to run. And I don't think they're going to necessarily run a college offense, but I think in terms of his motion style and trying to get on the boundary, get downhill, I don't think they were going to be able to do that with what they had. And I think a guy like Green at least helps you theoretically do a lot of what you were used to be able to do with Pouncey, get him out on the move, especially maybe like a zone type scheme. I don't really know what to think of Dan Moore. I hadn't heard too much about him, didn't watch too much of him after the draft. One guy that I was super impressed with was Quincy Roche, who I think a lot of us have touched upon. I think that was a big hole, that kind of third outside linebacker spot. So I think he can kind of assume that role that Highsmith was in last year. And then Najee especially, I think. I mean, I'm a big Steelers should always be running back by committee guy, but they're just never going to seem to do it. So if you're not going to do it, you might as well get a stud in the backfield. And I think Najee was the best guy there for him. So, I mean, especially if Canada's running his offense, anything at all like what you saw at Pittsburgh and LSU and Maryland, I could easily see Canada Najee getting 25, 30-ish touches a game with maybe a little bit McFarland sprinkled in on some Jets, maybe a little bit of Benny Snell if you need some reps off. But I think Najee, you're going to get your bang for your buck with him in year one.
Well, guys, terrific insight. Josh, Owen, thank you guys so much for being on. I'm sure this was a treat for the listeners. Be sure to follow their work, and you guys are going to have more film rooms and studies and breakdowns of this group throughout the summer. So appreciate you guys being on, and hopefully we'll have you guys on, and we will have you guys on sometime in the near future.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me on, guys. Thank you.
All right, Dave, again, our thanks to Josh and Owen. Really good discussion there. Appreciate having both those guys with us and all they've done here with the site for as long as they've been here.
Boy, how do you find these guys, Alex? I mean...
Oh, yeah, I think you found it. We were talking about that. You found Owen. I forget the origin story of Owen, but you found him. I know I didn't.
I don't remember. We've had so many contributors over the years, and sometimes I don't remember how I got here, but I sure am glad I got here. Because just amazing work by these guys, and I don't know, maybe next Friday maybe we'll have a couple more of these guys on as well too. But I really think, and hopefully people really enjoyed that. That roundtable, especially when it was Josh and Owen talking there, especially getting into the conversation about Norwood and Shakir Brown and some of those guys, and even Loudermilk there. I think getting down kind of deeper conversations about some of those guys there, and even the undrafted guys like I mentioned in Shakir Brown there. Owen's still a football player, right? Division III player there, and obviously knows a lot about coverages and defensive back and play and all like that. So just all around, just really enthralled, and boy, I those things could go 2 or 3 more hours as far as I'm concerned. So special shout out. Give the Twitter handles out for those two guys so people can get on the Twitter machine and follow them if they're not already, or give them a shout out and thank them for their time.
Sure, you can follow Josh at by Josh Carney, and you can follow Owen at Owen Straley 21. So again, appreciate having those guys on, and hopefully we'll hear from them sometime in the near future.
Absolutely, and once again, appreciate all their efforts and all the content that they both produce on the site, along with all of our contributors as well too. On top of that, real quick before we kind of transition here, Alex, I wanted to shout out to listenership has been just off the hook fantastic this off season. Not only the episodes of the Terrible Podcast, but the Terrible Take. We've slowly seen the numbers of those rise as well too, and site traffic's just been absolutely phenomenal throughout this off season. We try to make sure we get a good, at least 20 posts of a day relevant to this team out there. A question I have for listeners, and if you have time this weekend, if you just shoot me a quick email at theterriblepodcast@gmail.com is really how do you listen to the site? Listen to the site. How do you listen to the podcast? What apps do you use? Do any of you just go straight to the site and pull up the post and listen to it that way? And the other question is, man, you get kind of blind to this stuff, Alex, because I sit here on a desktop computer, actually three computers all day long. in front of me, and obviously I use my phone for alerts and all like that. But such a shift now between people and how they view and take in content, and obviously a huge rise in mobile and stuff like that. I'm just curious how many people out there just pretty much do all their sight reading predominantly on, say, a phone or a pad or some sort of device other than a desktop. So, and if you do primarily view the site on desktop, let me know that as well too. But I'm just interested in habits of our listeners and site readers. Is predominantly most of the information that you get from Steelers Depot off of mobile? How many hours maybe, or how much time a day do you spend on the site via desktop? So just generic, quick, throw something out at me, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. It certainly would help Alex and myself kind of make sure we're tailoring things and we're going in the right direction, because once again, I'm the old man here. I sit on the desktop, all day long, and I think for the most part you're on a laptop for most of the day, if I'm not mistaken, right, Alex? I mean, how would you, if you weren't? I would imagine most of the content that you would view would be on the phone, right?
Yeah, I'll be interested to hear the response from fans, and readers. But my guess is that 90% of people are doing this mobile, and no one even owns a desktop or laptop anymore.
Is that
for the most part?
And I guess that's what I'm getting at. I wonder how many people just don't have desktops in their house anymore.
Yeah, very few. Like I know my mom. I mean, she has a laptop, but she almost never uses it, and she's just always on her phone. And I imagine that is, if that's her, and she's older, then I imagine that the 20-something is probably in the same boat.
So if as many of you, once again, appreciate listenership, appreciate people visiting the site, but if you could drop me a quick email sometime this weekend, just even if it's like 6 words or whatnot, that's perfectly fine. I certainly would appreciate it. Once again, we thank all of our listeners and site readers, and man, just to look at where these people are around the globe, Alex, and it's just it's amazing the reach that the internet has.
Absolutely. All right, Dave, any other Steelers topics you wanted to cover today, or do you want to get to read your emails here and close out today's show?
Yeah, and I don't think because of, I think we have a good one here from Danielle Russell, who, speaking of around the world, Brisbane, Australia here. Good day, Dave, and I want to go to Australia. I want to go to Australia. I wonder if Danielle can hook me up with places to go and see there. Maybe next summer. That's some place my wife would like to go as well too there. But Brisbane, Australia. Thanks for making such an entertaining podcast. It keeps me going on my long drives for work. He's a truck driver. You both mentioned being fairly sure that Ben will be the next Steeler in the Hall of Fame. Is there any chance that Maurkice Pouncey makes it? Here's his resume. Played 11th season, was a 9-time Pro Bowler and 5-time All-Pro. He was named to the 2010's NFL All-Decade team. Alex, I've got a take on this, but I want to go last.
Okay. You're deferring the kickoff. I think there's a chance.
How do you feel about deferring the kickoff? There you go.
I don't really have an opinion on it. I'm usually of the mindset of I would rather kick in the first half because I want the ball to start the second half as I can regroup and attack and adjust based off what happened in the first half. But that's my take on kickoffs.
Okay.
That kind of thing. Anyway, Pouncey I think is borderline. I think he's got a really good resume, of course, but he's not going to be a first ballot kind of guy. And just because it is so tough for these offensive linemen to get in, Steelers fans just experienced that with the weight of Alan Faneca, who had even a stronger resume than Maurkice Pouncey. I think he could get in, but it may take several years for that to happen. And by the time Ben retires, I think he'll be able to get in before Maurkice Pouncey will.
I think along the same lines with you as well too. That I think down the road he does have a chance. And I think you were wise to mention, boy, if a guy like Alan Faneca, it takes how many times? 6?
Yeah, I think he was a 6-time finalist.
to get in. How many times? How long is it going to take a guy like look, Marquise Pouncey, obviously decorated. I think Dan was good to bring up that he definitely has the kind of the hardware and the trophies, if you will, to satisfy the needs there. But you know what, man? When you go and look, if any of you get a chance, go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame website and look at the people in the Hall of Fame by position. How many modern era, and I maybe I shouldn't use modern era. How many centers since say 19? We'll start with guys like Dermontti Dawson, 1988, so we get him included in there. Not only centers, but maybe interior full-fledged guards as well too. How many since say 1980? Well, I mean it'd have to be after 1988 because Dermontti, that was his rookie season. So let's say 2000 because that was the year or after. When did Dermontti go in? 2000 and what? 2, 3?
I don't know. I can look it up for you. I don't know.
He was class of 2012.
Okay. Wow.
So it took. So let's just take it from 2000. Okay, guys. Interior offensive linemen, and that obviously includes guards and centers. How many have been put into the Hall of Fame? Since then. And the list
since when?
Let's say even since 1990.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know the list. I assume it's not an especially large number.
Dermontti Dawson obviously got in. We saw Steve Hutchinson get in. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Kevin Mawai, and really, to be quite, I wrote about this when Mawai got in and Faneca didn't. What do you think of Hall of Famer when you think of Kevin Mawai?
Yeah, I do, but above Faneca, probably not.
I'm trying to go down the list here and see if anybody else sticks out here. It's so hard for some reason as an interior lineman and a center to get in. Now, obviously, the Steelers have a couple centers in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but that doesn't give you birthright, or team right to get in there. I guess that the long and short of it once again goes back to I think he can get in. I just wonder how long it's going to take maybe for him to get in. And who else? What other top centers played during the same realm as he did? Who's the Jet center?
Nick Mangold.
Yeah, I mean, what's his resume look like? I mean, there's a lot of good centers I think in the NFL that played kind of that same amount of years that Marquise Pouncey did, right?
Yeah, Mangold, 7-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro. Actually, going to be eligible for the Hall of Fame, I believe, starting. It was either this year or next year. He's right around this time. So I think Pouncey's got the better resume. But we'll see. I mean, I think he could get in. I think it's going to take several years for that to happen, though.
A decade from now, will he be in?
I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I'm going to say no too, man.
I think he could, decade from now.
I think it's possible, plausible, but man, and obviously you're going to have to get in before the 20-year mark. I would think he could get in within the next 20 years. I would think. You
would hope, but these offensive linemen in general, it's just been tough. So, I mean, how long did it take? Yeah, Faneca 6 years, so it could take Pouncey about 10 years.
And then once again, Dermontti Dawson played until 2000, and it took
12 years.
12 years. I mean, I guess Faneca should feel blessed, right?
Yeah, that's true.
For some reason, it's always the tackles. More so. So. Going to be interesting. Once again, I think the credentials are there. It's just, it seems like these interior linemen get to shaft a lot of time, And anyway, it'd be interesting to watch that play out. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. If it does,
Yeah.
it would come as a huge shock to me, I think.
And I think Ben, who will be first ballot, is going to get in before. Because Ben, if Ben retires after this year, he's going to get in 5 years from then. And I think that'll be before Marquise Pouncey hears his name called.
All right. Should we give the readers a break from me?
I don't know what that means, but
let's get the list. Let's wrap this up. It's a pretty full show today because I believe that roundtable with the guys went an hour, a little bit more there, and I think we've already chatted a good almost hour ourselves here. So we will be back. When are we going to be back, Alex?
I'll be back on Tuesday.
All right.
Yep.
And then Steelers mandatory minicamp gets underway next week, I believe on Tuesday. I think that's happening at Heinz Field this year. The preseason schedule time and dates were officially released. So there's that. And no surprise. Obviously, we've already known who they're going to play and things along that line. So, but in the meantime, until Tuesday, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex Kozora on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. You can follow the show at Terrible Podcast. You can email the show theterriblepodcast at gmail.com. Once again, if you could shoot me an email, that would be greatly appreciated on top of it. And thanks for listening, everybody. And as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.